Now, let's turn to some not so breaking news. Crime is up in Portland, way up, and nothing seems to be slowing it down. Over the weekend, police responded to 13 shootings in just 28 hours. One person died, 3 others got hurt. Their resources were stretched so thin that at one of those crime scenes, police actually needed some people from the community to stand there and block off traffic. If you can believe that, it's outrageous. But again, this is not breaking news. You know this is happening. The only thing broken is probably the record that we play every night on the news when we repeat these stories. Like last week, when business owners near the airport told us that crime and scary situations are at an all-time high and police response is at an all-time low.
When we call police, the response is that their hands are tied and that they really can't do anything to help the situation.
And then, when we do call, I don't ask an officer to come see us anymore because they don't have time. When I call the non-emergency line because one of our cars got stolen, I was on hold for 4 hours.
We've done so many of those interviews. We could do like a half an hour of just one after the next after the next. So many examples. But again, what would be the point of doing that? You already know what's happening. People know. Now they want solutions, and they want them yesterday. And to that, the police union said, how about in 5 years? The Portland Police Union published a 5-year plan on Facebook. And the bottom line is they want to double their police force, more than double it. They want to hire 840 officers in the next 5 years. For scale, right now we have about 530 officers out on the street doing their thing, and they have 59 more in training. The police union wants to more than double that. Now, you may be thinking to yourself, that doesn't exactly sound like defunding. And you'd be right. I checked with my calculator, and according to my math, it's actually more like funding. And in this city, especially after the last year and a half, funding the police is going to get some pushback. Unite Oregon spoke out against this. They describe themselves online as led by people of color, immigrants and refugees, rural communities, and people experiencing poverty. We work across Oregon to build a unified intercultural movement for justice. And they responded to the 5-year plan by saying, quote, this is clearly a bargaining tactic. We as residents of Portland should ask ourselves, is the solution to the issues that we are facing to throw more money at PPB, or is it to actually fund community-centered solutions like behavioral health and affordable housing? Now, this is not a completely unexpected take for a lot of reasons, but certainly because police are currently in contract negotiations right now. But if you ask Commissioner Joanne Hardesty, police don't have a money problem, they have a recruitment problem. Here's some of her conversation with Maggie Vespa.
So the balance is because of a lot of reasons, and what we need are a multitude of solutions for how we're going to address this huge rise in gun violence.
For those who equate it to a shortage of police and the reduction in the police staff because of those who have left the force, budget cuts, what have you, and they say we need to build up the police bureau staffing numbers.
So I'll tell you, when we cut $15 million out of a over $257 million budget, we gave back to the police bureau over 40 FTE that could do patrol. We've had massive retirements. We've had people quit. In my mind, what we have is a hiring problem, not a staffing problem.
Just because we just have a minute left, for people who say, well, they say, police officers have said they don't feel support from this council, and you've been an active vocal critic of Portland police.
If wanting accountability says I'm not supporting them, I know that people want simple solutions to complex problems. There's not one reason why Portland Police Bureau is not an attractive employer at this moment. There's not one reason why that is, right? But what we have to do as a community is decide how we want to be policed. And part of that work will come through the truth and reconciliation process. Part of it will come from engaging the community at a deeper level. But if nobody wants to be a Portland police officer, we actually authorized 30 positions during the budget process. But I added a stipulation, the money would only be released if they were able to hire the officers. And they have hired 0 as of this morning from the 30 that were authorized.
So, people aren't clamoring to be police officers in Portland. Hard to believe, I know. And again, not breaking news. The staffing issues or the hiring issues, however you want to put them, they started even before the pandemic. We knew dozens of officers would be retiring and that it could cause a problem, but it only grew over the past year. As gun violence surges across the city of Portland, the agency tasked with investigating those crimes faces a staffing crisis. Since July 2020, the Portland Police Bureau has lost 129 sworn members. 75 retired and 54 resigned. That includes officers, detectives, and command staff. To put that into perspective, the year before saw 6 retirements and 4 resignations. And the year before that, there were 45 retirements and 9 resignations. Take a look at this graph. It shows the amount of overtime hours worked each month. See that spike? That's last June, the height of Portland's protests, a month when police staff worked over 85,000 hours of overtime. Officers averaged almost 1,800 hours of overtime a day. It also happens to be the month shootings in the city started to increase. Okay, let's bring in Mike Benner for a second and talk about the crime that we saw over this past weekend. We reported that at one of the scenes, police were stretched so thin that they were actually asking people in the community to help block off the street, to block off this crime scene. What can you tell us about that and just the way that resources played into the work they had to do?
You're exactly right, Dan, and it's pretty wild. We understand that at one of the scenes this weekend, that neighbors had to come in and block streets while officers collected evidence. As you said, the Bureau was stretched so thin, they had to go down that road and do that, which is pretty remarkable. At another scene, we heard that a lone sergeant, one sergeant was by himself collecting evidence. Typically, we'll see a number of law enforcement officers doing something like that. But at this one scene, there was just one person. This is stuff we've really never heard about before. And it's worth mentioning this weekend, the 13 shootings in 28 hours, more than 150 shell casings were discovered at all of these scenes. Dan, it's worth pointing out that we're not talking about 151 little pieces of metal. Every shell casing represents a bullet. So imagine 151 bullets flying through the city this weekend.
So of the shootings that happened, we know that one person died. So that puts us at 69 total homicides so far this year. The record all time in Portland is 70. So here we are knocking on the door with 2.5 months left to go in the year.
In all likelihood, Dan, we are going to hit 70 and surpass 70. It's quite frightening to even think what the final number will be in 2021. But you said it, the 69th person murdered on our streets. Just the other night, it was near McCoy Park in North Portland. That person has yet to be identified.
Mike, so many of our viewers know you from your work on the night shift and working some of the evening shows. Recently, though, KGW's kind of reassigned you to work primarily on shooting coverage and trying to figure out, where the city goes from here and kind of what is happening in the city. Can you talk a little bit about what we can expect from your reporting?
Yeah, I'll be teaming up with my colleague Kyle Aboshi on covering gun violence in the Rose City. I'll be the one kind of on the streets and in the neighborhoods talking to people impacted by the gun violence, talking to the victims' families, that sort of thing, while Kyle will be focusing on the investigative side of things and looking at trends. This is nothing we're necessarily proud of, but obviously it's something we have to cover because what we're seeing here in Portland is just off the charts. It really is.
You said it. All right, Mike Benner, thank you, sir. Now, last year we heard what? Chants from protesters upset over the murder of George Floyd and a lot of other incidents of police brutality. They wanted their government to defund the police. And a lot of their government leaders heard that too. We know Portland police have lost millions in last year's budget. And the same thing happened in cities across the country. But now some of them are starting to go the other way. A New York Times article that we think is worth your time describes how leaders in several cities are starting to increase spending on police as crime rates rise. New York and Los Angeles both increased police spending after cutting it last year. So did Austin, Texas. The mayor of Burlington, Vermont, went from cutting the police budget to raising it and giving officers a $10,000 bonus to stay on the force. But the article zeroes in specifically on Dallas, Texas, where the city's liberal mayor increased police funding, aiming to increase the number of officers that they have on the streets there. And he says that when he did it, no one protested. No one came to public hearings to speak out against it. Now, according to the article, those officers are trying to figure out how to now reduce the historic rise in crime that they've seen without targeting communities of color.